There is an invisible border in the global economy. Cross it the normal way, and you face millions of dollars in tariffs, taxes, and rigorous inspections. But cross it under the radar, and you are completely untouchable. It's 3:14 in the morning. Inside a massive customs logistics center just outside Los Angeles, a conveyor belt hums under harsh fluorescent lights. Thousands of small, gray plastic bags blur past the scanners. There are no bulk shipping crates here, no massive steel cargo containers waiting to be unpacked. Just single, individually wrapped packages, millions of them. If you look closely at the customs declaration on any single bag, you'll notice a mathematical pattern. The declared value is almost always suspiciously low. $14, $22, never more than $800. The scanners beep, the screens flash green, the bags move on. This is not a coincidence. By staying strictly under the $800 threshold, an obscure U.S. trade law known as Section 321 makes these packages entirely exempt from the law. Under this trade law, imported packages valued under $800 are completely exempt from import duties, taxes, and rigorous customs inspections. It's called the de minimis loophole. Because ultra-fast fashion ships individually, directly to consumers, they bypass the millions of dollars in tariffs that traditional mall brands have to pay. 15 million times a day, an invisible border is crossed without a sound.
But to understand how this machine became a monster, we have to look back. And ironically, the blueprint wasn't drawn up overseas. We built it ourselves. In 1984, American manufacturing was bleeding due to cheap imports flooding the market. A titan of American textiles named Roger Milliken funded a massive study with consulting firm Kurt Salmon Associates. They called it the Quick Response Initiative. The goal was to use data to completely re-engineer the domestic supply chain, drastically reducing the time it takes to get a design to the store rack to help the U.S. compete with Asian imports. But this blueprint inadvertently created a disaster. By standardizing the exact logistical steps required to make fashion hyper-fast, they didn't just save their factories. They wrote an instruction manual. They handed a perfectly optimized, mathematically proven blueprint of mass production to the very overseas competitors they were trying to beat. It massively accelerated offshoring instead of stopping it. But to automate the clothes, you first have to standardize the body. Fast fashion relies entirely on off-the-rack sizing. This system was invented by the U.S. military during the American Civil War to rapidly produce uniforms for thousands of soldiers. Post-war retailers adapted this logistical, data-driven framework for civilian clothing. They stripped the individuality out of clothing, making the human body a standardized metric, which laid the foundational infrastructure for mass production.
Early pioneers of this speed operated very differently. The foundation of Zara didn't start with copying runway trends. In 1963, founder Amancio Ortega started Confecciones Goa as a small workshop making quilted bathrobes. He built his empire by organizing thousands of local women in Galicia, Spain into sewing cooperatives. Zara's original superpower was extreme localization, entirely opposite to the hyper-globalized Asian outsourcing model that defines fast fashion today. Everything changed when fashion became a data farming operation. In 2008, a search engine optimization specialist named Chris Xu founded a company called ZZKKO. He didn't care about fashion design. He cared about search volume. He originally drop-shipped cheap wedding dresses from Chinese wholesale markets to Western brides based entirely on algorithmic demand. He eventually pivoted to general apparel and changed the name to She Inside, and later, Shein. The algorithm began to scrape the internet, feeding data directly to the factory floor. The machine was no longer predicting trends, it was manufacturing them in real time. Traditional giants panicked. In early 2018, H&M realized millennials were getting fast fashion fatigue, so they launched a stealth brand called Niden. Led by Oscar Olsen, it was supposed to use data and micro-influencers to drop limited items, supposedly eliminating waste. It was a spectacular failure. The brand was quietly killed and folded back into H&M within a year. Other giants tried to fight back with pure automation. In 2018 and 2019,
European fashion giant ASOS attempted to heavily automate their massive warehouses in Berlin and Atlanta. They wanted to replace human hands with flawless software and robotics. But the sheer volume of inventory overwhelmed the algorithms, and the systems failed spectacularly. A massive backlog of unfulfilled orders crashed their profits by nearly 70%. It proved that ultra-fast fulfillment is incredibly fragile. It cannot be sustained by software alone. It requires human exhaustion.
This exploitation isn't just an overseas problem. The modern reckoning with sweatshop labor had a major catalyst in El Monte, California in 1995. Federal and state officers discovered a prison inside an ordinary residential apartment complex. 72 undocumented Thai nationals were held in indentured servitude in a barbed wire compound, sewing for major U.S. brands. The young civil rights attorney who led the legal team to secure their stolen wages was Julie Su, who is currently the acting U.S. Secretary of Labor. She realized the system is designed to blur the line between the company that sells the product and the human hands that make it. When the violence is outsourced, the legal maze gets thicker. 5 months prior to the 2013 Rana Plaza collapse, the Tazreen Fashions fire in Bangladesh killed 112 workers. Unprecedentedly, the factory owner, Delwar Hussain, was actually charged with culpable homicide. However, the trial was severely stalled for over a decade, showing that the judicial system often protects the industry. Even digital critics are silenced. In 2011, Forever 21 sent aggressive cease and desist letters and threatened SLAP lawsuits against small satirical bloggers, most notably Rachel Kane of the blog WT Forever 21. They accused independent writers of trademark dilution simply for mocking their clothes, using the threat of financial ruin to force silence before eventually backing down. The physical waste of this machine is equally devastating. We are told to recycle our clothes, but there is a hidden defense mechanism: elastane. If a cotton or wool garment contains as little as 2% to 5% elastane, like spandex or lycra, it cannot be mechanically recycled. The highly elastic polyurethane fibers stretch, melt under the friction, clump together, and jam the teeth of industrial shredding machines. This tiny percentage effectively renders billions of garments completely unrecyclable. The materials themselves are an economic illusion. Fast fashion relies on polyester, which is just plastic derived from oil. While the U.S. heavily subsidizes its cotton farmers, keeping global prices somewhat suppressed, countries like China heavily subsidize their petrochemical and oil industries. These massive oil subsidies make virgin polyester so artificially cheap that it constantly undercuts subsidized agricultural cotton. It is mathematically cheaper to drill for oil and spin it into a shirt than to grow a plant. Governments try to intervene, but the machine adapts. In 2020, France passed the AJAC law, famously banning fashion brands from shredding or incinerating unsold deadstock clothing. To bypass the law, many brands simply packed up their unsold inventory and trucked it across the border to neighboring European countries, where it was still legal to shred and burn it. For consumers, the machine offloads the liability directly onto you. When you process a return online, the logistics often cost more than the garment is worth. As a result, brands utilize a keep-it policy. They refund you, but tell you not to mail the item back. This keeps their corporate waste numbers artificially low and offloads the landfill guilt entirely onto the buyer. Your closet becomes their landfill. And long before the clothes reach your closet, they poison the water. The popular narrative blames consumers' home washing machines for releasing synthetic microplastics into the ocean. But industry experts note that a massive, disproportionate percentage of microfiber shedding actually occurs during the industrial manufacturing process. Millions of tons of synthetic microfibers are blasted out of the fabric during factory pre-washing, dyeing, and finishing stages. This toxic effluent is often dumped directly into local waterways before the garment is even shipped. We look at our closets and we see personal style, but the clothes are just the byproduct. They are the exhaust fumes of an invisible, algorithmic engine that we allowed to quietly wrap itself around the globe. A system that turns military sizing into digital data and human psychology into search volume. A system that subsidizes plastic, jams the shredders, burns the dead stock in the dark, and leaves the liability on your doorstep. The bags will keep crossing the border 15 million times a day, under the limit, under the radar. We built a system that gives us exactly what we asked for, the exact second we ask for it. And now, we can never make